that we are going to learn today. One is that I'm always fascinated why or how Jesus was both God and human. You can imagine that Jesus is human and again he is God. Like, how does that happen? It's like a human who has powers. So he is both human and he is both God. He has the ability to and everyone dies, just evolve or rather goes up in smoke. And he has the ability also to be under humans, like you can be crucified, you can be beaten up, but you don't do anything. And that is Jesus. And you can still feel hungry. You know, when they say that Jesus was human, it simply means that he went through the processes of a man. And all the feelings that a man can feel, Jesus felt. He was human. However, they don't describe those processes in the Bible. Hatujui kama mama yake alikuwa anamchapa. Hatujui kama aliwahi sumbua. We don't know. Aliwahi lia. Where is it? Okay, Jesus wept there. So we don't know. So we don't know if when he was born, vile alikuwa anazaliwa, unajua it's normal for children to cry to show that they are alive. We don't know. So I don't know if he was God, he cried when he was. There are so many things that fascinate me when I think about Jesus was human and he was God. How about the mother? Like, this is God. Unajua tu mtoto wangu ni Mungu. Sasa hata unaogopa sijui ni mchape ama like. All these things always fascinate me when I think about the aspect of Jesus was human as well as God. Number two, by the way, there's this thing, being famous and being popular. You do know that those are two different things, right? Someone who's famous is well known by a lot of people. But something that is popular is known for something or a quality that many people enjoy or many people like. So popularity is different from fame. Fame means you are known all over, like the way we know George Bush. He's a very famous person, right? We know him all over the world. But the way I can say chapati is very popular. It is liked by many, it is enjoyed by many people for a particular characteristic. It's popular. So sometimes something that is famous may not necessarily be popular. And something that is popular may not necessarily be famous. So that is one thing that you should, I'm just doing a prologue. Then the third thing is that I'm always fascinated how God really wanted us to enjoy food. And I am a person who enjoys food. Obviously, it's visible. So I'm always fascinated how God wanted us to enjoy food until he gave us so many taste buds. You have like a lot of taste buds in your mouth. You can taste various different kinds of food. So inamaanisha like God really wanted you to enjoy that food. Yani ukikula chumvi usifeel tu like unakula mchele. Unajua hii ni chumvi. You can eat different kinds of food and enjoy them thoroughly. That is God. So I've always wondered, ama tukienda heaven pia kuna by the way, tulikuwa tukiambiwa tukiwa dogo ati heaven tutaandaliwa banquet. You know a banquet? In a banquet they put a table and then they put a running food. Mpaka huko. So mwenye ako huko hata aoni yenye iko huko hivyo because wameweka hapa kuku, turkey, wameweka turkey ni kulukulu. Sijai kula hiyo by the way. Ina sound delicious, but naonanga vile inafanana and then I'm like, So kuna turkey, kulukulu, kuku, kuna hizo vitu zote hapo. Then I'm always, kitambo tulikuwa tukiambiwa ukienda mbinguni, ati kuna hiyo banquet huko, tutakula bila tutaenjoy. Paka tutakula hiyo matunda yenyewe ya mbinguni. I don't know if it is possible that we'll be eating. Only God knows. And then someone challenged me the other day that Yesu si alisema anaenda kutuandalia makao. So haitakuwa tu kuabudu peke yake, tutakuwa tunalala, so I was like, okay. So these are the things that I usually like to think about and smile to myself when I'm alone, about how that's the mystery of the whole thing. And these things we'll never understand them when we are on earth until we reach there. Tutakaa tukipiga story na Mungu tukimuuliza hii maneno. So today I want us to read one thing or one story that I really find fascinating. It has so many question marks. It leaves so many question marks in my head. It's in John chapter 6. It's in John chapter 6, yes. If you can find it. No, not the New King James, the Message. After this, Jesus went across the Sea of Galilee. Some call it Tiberias, by the way, it's true. A huge crowd followed him, attracted by the miracles they had seen him do among the sick. Now, stop there. You'll notice that at this point, even in our lives, there are many people who follow Jesus because of what? The miracles that Jesus do. Which is not really bad, but it's not the right thing to do. Even here, you'll notice that some people, maybe in life, maybe in your walk of faith, you'll notice that some people will follow Jesus and will follow God only because of the benefit they want to get from God. Only because of the miracles they see Jesus doing. Yesu juzi aliokoa jirani yangu, wacha pia mimi nifuate, pia mimi nitake hiyo gari. So wacha pia mimi nianzenge kwenda kanisani, nitafute hiyo gari vile jirani yangu alipata gari. It's following Christ, but for the wrong reason. We are following Christ for miracles. It is a point of attraction, yes. It is a point of attraction to God. It can be a point of call to God, but it shouldn't be a fixation. That, tunafuata Yesu sababu tunataka gari. So na gari ikikuja sasa, that is it. Ding. Ama isipokuja, we become frustrated and we go off. You'll notice there that verse 3, they had seen him do miracles among the sick. Then when he got to the other side, he climbed a hill and sat down, surrounded by his disciples. It was nearly time for the feast of Passover, kept annually by the Jews, up to today, by the way. When Jesus looked out and saw that a large crowd had arrived, they said to Philip, "Where can we buy bread for these people?" At this point, Jesus is very compassionate. He said to Philip, he said this to Philip, and see, he's saying this to test them. To stretch Philip's faith. The new NIV, I think, says to test them. To party the new NIV, he asks this only to test him, for he already had in mind what he was going to do. I like that. For he already knew what he was going to do. Then verse 7, Jesus answered, 200 silver pieces wouldn't be enough to buy bread for each person to get a piece. Okay. So Philip, let me ask you, does Philip fail the test or pass the test? He fails the test because Jesus asks him to see what he will do. To stretch, in fact, the message says to stretch his faith. But then Peter's response, or Philip's response, is very funny. That to party Philip's response 7, 200 silver coins wouldn't be enough. It's like already a negative answer. He has negated everything. Wouldn't be enough to buy bread for each person to get a piece. 8. One of the disciples, it was Andrew, the brother of Simon Peter, said, "There is a little boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish." And that is the correct term to use, by the way. It was barley loaves. Si mkate yenye ilikuwa inatiwa, sijui tuseme aje, baking powder. It was, they were barley, unleavened, thank you. But this one processed, ni kama brown bread. Mnaonanga brown bread vile inakuwa. iko na hiyo seeds ndani na nini. Kuna ingine ni mzuri sana, mtaenda kununua. Iko barley bread, like it's still in its as little as processed. By the way, these foods we eat nowadays, let me tell you. Munaona like wheat. Wheat is so processed such that it has lost its nutrients. So like white bread, white things, what they do is that they go to the industry, they remove all the outer things, and then they process them. Then they add chemicals to make it white, like rice. Rice is normally brown, but they add chemicals to make it white. I tell you, it's so bad. Ukiona hiyo nini utasema wa? And that is how we begin dying of strange diseases. So there are barley loaves here, a boy who has carried barley loaves and 2 fish. And it must be a very, you see, he knew he was following Jesus, so acha ni pack. Naona, acha ni pack chakula. I wish kila mtu angefikiria kaka katoto. But that's a drop in the bucket for a crowd like this. They fail the test of Jesus. Jesus said, and by the way, do you think it is wrong that they failed the test? Because they just give honest answers. Kusema ukweli hakuna. Yenye iko haiwezi tosha hawa watu 500, 1500. Walikuwa 1500. Walikuwa 1500. So haiwezi watosha. So it is not wrong that they failed the test. It is, they were just speaking the truth. And sometimes that is now life. Life will present you with a situation, and it is the reality of the thing. Like huwezi ona, it is true this is happening, and this is what is existing. And the other side, nafaa ufikirie vizuri, maybe Jesus is just testing and stretching your faith. So Jesus said, make the people sit down. There was a nice carpet of green grass in the message, in the place. They sat down. Is that existent in verse 10 of the NIV or New King James? You're a carpet of green grass. They sat down, okay, good, thank God. I thought it's just a message. They sat down where there was plenty of grass in that place, and they sat down to read the message. So the men sat down in a number about 5,000. And I'm always wondering, how about, like if these 5,000 people, Yesu anaongea na wanasikia wote. Like Jesus was speaking to 5,000 people, and they were all listening, and they were all hearing, without a microphone, without video assistance, without projection, and they were all hearing, until they were amazed, until they follow him, 5,000 people. But you notice that some of these 5,000 people walimfuata because they are muji, hata hawakuwa na haja na maybe Yesu. So they are sitting down, and there are 5,000 people. Number 11. Then Jesus took the bread, and having given thanks, very important, very important, gave it to those who were seated. Very again important. You see, there are passages when you read the Bible. There are lines and stories that you should always be very, very keen. Tupatie the New King James of 10 to 11. The New King James says, and this one underlines Jesus' words, says, make them sit down, make the people sit down. That's an instruction, right? Now there was much grass in that place, so the men sat down in a number of about 5,000. I don't know. People always say that there were 5,000 men. But sometimes I'm always saying, like, men is used interchangeably to mean people, right? So it might not necessarily be 5,000 men in sex. So Jesus took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed them to the disciples, and the disciples to those sitting down. It means when you are standing, you might have been unaweza kuwa ulikosa. The instruction was to people to sit down. And likewise, the fish, and as much as they wanted. Wow. The message 11. The message 11, 2011. all ate as much as they wanted. Wow. 12. When people had eaten their fill, he said to his disciples, gather the leftovers so nothing is wasted. 13. They went to work and filled 12 large baskets with leftovers from the 5 barley loaves. Then 14. Then people realized that God was at work among them in what Jesus had done. They said, this God's prophet, or rather, this is a prophet for sure, God's prophet right here in Galilee. Jesus saw that in their enthusiasm, they were about to grab him and make him king. So he slipped off and went back up to the mountain to be by himself. What a humble servant. And then in the evening, then it continues. At the end of this passage, there are so many takeaways such that hata unashindwa useme gani, like which one, they all hit you at different points. First of all, Jesus gives thanks in order for people to enjoy the food. In order for the miracle to multiply, he gives thanks of the little that he has. It's a big revelation that only few people sometimes get it. Like sometimes you only have 5 loaves to feed 5,000. But what happens? In order for you to feed them, just give thanks. Then God multiplies it. And it becomes a lot. So he was trying to teach us something here. That despite Andrew saying, ni kidogo, haiwezi tosha hao wote. Just give thanks and then it multiplies. Then it continues and says that after they sat down, they distributed. There is order first of all before distribution, right? There is order first of all before blessings come. There must be order. Like God will never bless people in chaos. It is just when there is chaos anywhere. Tuseme kwa familia yako mnapigananga tu kila siku. Alafu mnaomba ati jioni sasa Mungu tubariki. Wapi? Haifanyika. There must be some sort of order. Some sort of arrangement. Some sort of order in order for blessings to come by. So sometimes all it requires is for you to have order. And then it continues and says that, I'm trying to memorize where it was, that after he gave thanks, to turudishe 12 kidogo tu before we go to the what we learn from there. So people are eating to their fill, and then they gather the 12 baskets remaining. And then 13, 14. So what happens is this. There are 5,000 people. Maybe 3,000, maybe 2,000 had followed Jesus because they saw him doing miracles. So they are following Jesus because of a wrong thing. But look, what prompts them to admit that it's a prophet is again a miracle. So sometimes it happens. And then what they do is that Jesus sees them and quickly reads the audience. By the way, reading your audience is one of the most important things that you can ever do. Like you can read like 50% of your audience are sleeping, 50% of your audience are awake, 50% are alert, 20% are true, 1% is paying attention, and only one person will respond. Like that is reading your audience. Reading your audience is usually very important. Jesus understood the audience. Never be found in a place where you cannot read the audience. It is one dangerous danger. Like you are serving people, and the people you are serving, you cannot read them. It is dangerous to be in a position like that. If you will ever be caught in a position where you can't even read who is around you, you can't expect to predict what's around you. You can't read them. Wezi jua, it is a dangerous place. Either, one, you'll be falsely glorified, or number 2, you'll be brought down very quickly. Like they wanted to falsely, or not falsely really, but untimely glorifying Jesus. He is a prophet, but it was not his time yet to be glorified. So Jesus notices, hawa watu wanataka kunifanya nikuwe king sahi. Akaretreat, akajiendea. To be alone. What a wonderful thing to do. Sometimes to retreat away from the 5,000 people and just to be alone. Sometimes let me give you a challenge. Even if you've done something good, even if you've done something good to people, sometimes even don't wait for their thank you. They will falsely glorify you. And they will untimely maybe glorify you. Sometimes it's just good to retreat. Fanya mema na ujiende tu hata kama ameenda wapi? Alienda. Okay, fine. Give without expecting to be given back. So what do we learn? There are 4 lessons here that are very important other than those ones. I find this is as one of the most inspiring stories in the Bible, and it's so simple but very inspiring. Number 1, Jesus had compassion. That anajua watu wote wamemfuata tu because wanataka kuponywa nini, wengine wamemfuata because ako na nguvu ya kuwaponya. But even at that point, he's still very compassionate. How gracious is our God. That at the end of the day, in fact, disciples walikuwa wanataka, in another version, the disciples walisema, wacha tuwaambie waende makwa. I think it's in Luke's version. Tuwaambie waende wakule makwa ndo warudi. But Jesus akasema hapana. So sometimes Jesus is very compassionate, and not even sometimes, always Jesus is very compassionate. And of course they had traveled far. Unajua wametembea na yeye, wamekuja, and all those times wamechoka, wamekaa hapo. So all people want to do is to eat. In James chapter 4 inasema, what good does it do to you if you go to a place and say, God bless you? The message inaisemanga vizuri. At God bless you, have peace of God, and you don't give them food. You are as good as that person who does not, or rather who does not exercise his faith. Because faith without works then is dead. I think it expresses so much better in the message. Tukipata tutaisoma siku nyingine. Then number 2, I wish tuipate leo. Let me just look for it quickly. Just quickly. It's in James chapter 2. Tufungulie James chapter 2, the message 17 hapo. James 2:17 or 16. Isn't it? Okay, tuanzie 15. Inaita outrageous nonsense. For instance, you come upon an old friend dressed in rags and half-starved, like akona njaa kabisa umekutana naye, and say, good morning friend, be clothed in Christ. Be filled with the Holy Spirit and walk off without so much as providing a coat or a cup of soup. Where does that get you? Yani wewe ni mtumishi wa Mungu sana. Isn't it obvious that God talk without God acts is outrageous nonsense? I think it's so harsh in saying that. 18 inamalizia ikisema, I can already hear some of you agreeing by saying, sounds good, you know, you take, and then it continues and says, faith without works is dead. So that is what faith actually is. True faith is in display there. Jesus uses other people to bless others. That is another characteristic. And that's why you can never live as an island. You can never live alone. There are gone are the days when, I don't know if they still exist. Maybe it still exists because God works in miraculous ways. But sometimes unaweza ishi na watu, unapata mtu amekosana na majirani wote hapo. Ni yeye peke yake tu, yani, like, you know, those people. Amekosana na huyu, amekosana na huyu, amekosana na huyu, na ni yeye peke yake tu ndiye ana exist, ako tu mbaya na kila mtu. How will God bless you in that environment? That's why it says, pursue peace. Like, weenda watafute, hata kama wamekukosea, wewe ndio uenda watafute. Sometimes God will use the person next to you to bless you. As much as you don't like them, as much as you like them, as much as you are at loggerheads, make peace with them, because chances are you'll annoy the boy that has 5 loaves. na Mungu ataenda ama atazikula zote. Anyway, that is a very far analogy, but God will use someone else to bless you. So make sure you are at peace with them. Don't be the neighbor mwenye unakosana na kila jirani hapo. So another lesson, God will use other people to bless others. The very moment Jesus decides to use the boy to turn the 5 loaves and 2 fish into food of multitudes. So next, and sometimes he will use a very little boy, like an unexpected person, right? Sometimes blessing will not come at sasa mimi nategea tu ni juu sasa Isabella ni beshte yangu, sasa Mungu tu ndiye atamtumia yeye kuni sometimes it will come in a very unexpected way, like a very unexpected person in your circle. It must be in your circle, of course. Then 3, Jesus is big enough for any expectation. And that is another lesson that we always learn. Like, there is no 5,000 problems that are equal to God. 5,000 problems is just a snap to God, like us. Oh, God, thank you for this. Boom, 5,000. Na sijui, like, I'm always wondering, unajua kwa movie ya Yesu hiyo, walionyesha like Yesu ameinua hivi, like they played with us camera tricks. Walienda wakasimama nyuma ya Yesu, hao watu wa camera, and then wakaonyesha a ground oblique. Ground oblique ni hii. Ground oblique. So unaona camera at this angle. So vile walirudisha chini na unaona mikate imejaa. So I don't know if that is what happened, but if that is what happened, then I don't know. But I wonder, disciples walikuwa wanaona tu zinatokea out of nowhere hizo mikate ama like haiishi ama alikuwa anatoa na ingine inakuja tu out of nowhere. Like I don't know what happened, but it's very miraculous. There are no 5,000 problems in this world that are big to God. Sometimes it appears big in our eyes. It appears very big in our eyes. Unaona but indeed God is faithful. Then number 4, and finally, tusome Colossians 1:17 before that. Colossians 1:17, where it says, in him, I think in him are all things. Oh, the message says he was there before any of it came into existence and holds it all together right up to this moment. The New King James put it in a more memorable verse. It says, he is before all things, and in all things, and in him all things consist or exist. Like existing is consisting, but from within. Now, number 4, nothing we face here on earth is too big for God. And that is almost the same thing. It's too big for God. Nothing is too big for God. Not even 5,000 hungry people are too big for God. Hey, let me give you an encouragement today. Sometimes we would want to follow Jesus. And sometimes following Christ, because you've seen him do something to people, is the only way it's the only way we get around. Because that is how our faith is built. You saw Jesus healing someone, and now you want to believe in that also, which is okay. Just remember that God does not despise that. Don't be lied to by anyone that or let me say like this, don't be deceived by people that God does not care about your needs. He only wants your heart. Well, he does want your heart, but he also cares about what you need. Sometimes what you need might be as apparent as hunger, or money, or property, or, it can be as obvious as that. But imagine God will still want that to be done for you because he cares. What amazes me, and the takeaway for this story, you should remember, is that God is ever compassionate. He loves us so much, such that he's willing to bankrupt 5,000 people, or rather to bankrupt and to, kuna wimbo kwa Hillsong inasema bankrupting heaven, which it's really weird theology, but he's giving us 5,000 just out of something little. First of all, as we conclude, always when you approach God, have something at hand. Have something at hand. It is so miraculous that God, when he wanted to use people, he was always asking them, what do you have? Today, when you approach God for hunger, for food, for money, for jobs, for whatever, for faith of healing, for whatever, any miraculous doing, God is asking you, what do you have in your hand? If it is not as apparent as it seems, he will ask you, he will ask you something to test your faith. He will bring something to stretch your faith. You will understand it in your own local way of how God will try to stretch your faith. But it's important to know, what do you have in your hand? Sometimes you'll have nothing and you want something. It won't happen. Yeah? You'll be like the disciples saying, wacha tu tuwatume nyumbani. So, let me pray today that God enables us to acknowledge his superiority, and also helps us to just to be able to give in, to trade in what we have as our little faith in expectation of something big that will happen as 5,000 miracles. Let's pray. Dear Lord, we thank you for this afternoon. And I thank you because of everything that you are doing in our lives, little things and little growths that you're sparking up in our lives. My King of Glory, behold, this day we have read about how you fed 5,000 people, 5,000 men with only 5 loaves and 2 fish. It's an impossible task. But King of Glory, behold, before you it was possible. Help us in our human nature to know which things are possible before you, and to know that all things seemingly big enough, seemingly 5,000 challenges and problems, are nothing before you, because my King of Glory, you can be able to feed everything and to supplicate everything that we need in just an instance, even pressed down, shaken, and even flown to be left over. Thank you because, my King of Glory, you are doing it in our lives, and we want to believe and have faith, King of Glory, that everything is working together for our good. Thank you because, King of Glory, of the lessons that you continually teach us, and we believe strongly in our heart that there is something greater that is coming in our lives today and in the days to come.